What is up, guys? This is Rio, and today I got my Japanese watch on because I'm in a Toyota Camry Hybrid, a 2020 Camry Hybrid. This thing is super clean, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I've never driven a Camry before, so I'm pretty excited to get this out on the road and kind of see how it feels, put it into sport mode, put it into eco mode, feel the different vibes out. I've heard that the Camry Hybrid is kind of the Camry to get. I know there's the TRD model that's a little sportier, V6 engine, a lot of power, the same engine as the Lotus, but hybrids are kind of more within Toyota's brand lineage. You know, they got the Prius, so why don't we compare this car to the Prius? So what I'm gonna do is kind of break down some of the basic stuff right now. The way that it works is there's an LE, an SE, and an XLE. For the 21 model year, there's an XSE coming out, which is gonna be an even more performance-oriented version of this car. This happens to be the current top trim for 2020, and it's more luxury-oriented. I'm actually a big fan of it. Usually, I tend to prefer sportier trims, but what you get in this luxury trim, first of all, is a super nice interior, really nice use of materials. You have this cool faux wood design trim. You have leather, or you have soft touch, upper dash. You have stitching on the center part of the dash, really nice center console. It actually grays out that little silver thing that some people don't like that goes across. So it makes the car feel super, super clean. The leather seats are my favorite thing about the XLE. They have a cross stitch in the center section, which you just don't get even in the XSE. So this is really clean. The front of the XSE, which currently can be found in the non-hybrid, but again in 21 will be found in the hybrid models, kind of resembles that Lexus style grille where the grille goes in and then out. It doesn't look bad, but I've always said that I prefer that in and out style grille more on an SUV. I think it looks more proportional on an SUV, which is true of the Lexus SUVs. On this car, I kind of prefer the more wide grille you get on the XLE, so I'm a big fan of the design of this. The only thing that it's missing outside is maybe a spoiler or the quad exhaust you get on the XSE or the TRD. Not a big deal though, this is a hybrid after all, and it's not afraid to let you know. When you get a hybrid Toyota, you get a blue outline on the Toyota badges in the front and the back, so you definitely know, even from 5-10 feet away, that this is a hybrid, not to mention some badges on the side and on the back, of course. So this is all about being a hybrid. It's not ashamed of that. You do get some pretty cool wheels on the XLE. You get 18-inch, I almost said 20. You get 18-inch wheels on the XLE. They look really clean. I actually prefer the alloy look on the wheels over that two-tone look you get on the TRD or on the XSE. Even on the SE, I think sometimes you can get the black alloy, like the metallic painted and alloy wheels. I still overall like this look better, looks more clean. It actually looks more like a Lexus, which is obviously a compliment to this car. Now, we gotta talk about power before we get driving. And this car has a naturally aspirated 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. Obviously it's a hybrid, so it also has a battery. So something to note is that for the base LE trim, you get a different battery. And that battery is good for 51 miles of city and 53 miles of highway range. Unfortunately, in the SE, the XLE, and the forthcoming XSE hybrids, you get a different battery for some reason. It doesn't do as well with fuel economy, so it gets 44 city, 47 highway. Still ridiculous, still super good, but just not as good as the LE trim and not quite as good as the Prius, unfortunately, which is this car's in-brand competitor. I think all day of the week, you should get one of these instead of a Prius. And I'm gonna tell you guys why, but let's get on the road and then I'll tell you guys. So pulling this car out onto the road, I'm currently in eco mode. I'm gonna switch it up to normal and then sport in a bit, but we'll start in eco because after all, this is a hybrid. I got water in my throat, bro. All right, so comparing this car to the Prius, the biggest reason, the number one reason why I would get this car over a Prius, and this is like, I think this should be super obvious, it's the looks. Like, this thing looks super clean, sleek, it's a nice sedan, and let's just say the Prius it doesn't look that cool. The Prius looks like a science experiment or something, and this thing looks really, really clean. This looks like a normal sedan, while the Prius looks like a blob. So I would get this based off looks, off rip. Now, I'm gonna admit one thing, and I already said it, it's that the Prius has a slightly better range than this car does. So the hybrid Prius gets around 55 or 57 miles in the city. So yeah, the Prius definitely beats this car out on mileage, but I think the looks of this are worth that slight cost. Now, speaking of cost, this does cost more than the Prius as well, so another thing to factor in. The base LE and the base Prius, I think, are around $2,000 difference in price. the Camry being more expensive. This car is almost around $35,000, so definitely a good chunk of change more expensive than a base Prius. But again, I think it's well worth the money, and it's still a fairly affordable vehicle compared to, let's say, some of the German cars out there, even some of the other Japanese cars. This is a hybrid, so it gives you a bunch of tech and it saves you money at the pump. And it has leather. I showed you guys. It's super nice. It also has super cool headlights, and that's something, again, it's not that the Prius has ugly headlights, but it's just that this car has a more sleek and clean design that definitely evokes more of a luxury look, while the Prius kind of looks a little bit more budget to me. And again, maybe it's just the entire design versus this car being a little bit more upmarket now, but it's just something to consider when you're looking at the two options. Now, another really big reason why I like the Camry, and this is something that I think a lot of people will take into consideration, is safety. Now, it's not that the Prius is unsafe per se, but this definitely does better on all safety tests, and it's kind of hard to beat a Camry when it comes to safety because, I mean, they just kind of kill it with safety. I know Toyota's had a bad rep in the past sometimes with certain safety issues, but they've really come around to combat that, and these days they really try their best to create some of the safest vehicles on the road, and they have a ton of active safety. This has blind spot detection and forward collision warning, a bunch of stuff that really helps you stay safe on the road. Again, the Prius might have some of the same stuff, but the overall safety of this car is a little bit higher. All right, so safety aside, I think it's time to throw this car into sport mode and kind of see how it does a little bit. I'm in well, this is a CVT, so I'm supposedly in second gear, but really, who knows what gear I'm really in. I'm just gonna leave it in sport and let the car do the work for me. I can definitely feel the steering tighten up a bit in sport. We're going downhill right now, so I can't really tell you much about the throttle, but the steering tightened up a bit and the car just feels tighter. Yeah, I don't think this car has adaptive suspension or anything, but the steering alone definitely makes quite a bit of a difference from that more loose standard setup you get in Eco. Now that we're on a slightly flatter road, I'm gonna give it a little gas. Look, I mean, this car isn't super fast, but it's a little peppy car when it needs to be. I think this car perfectly represents kind of the modern car and how all cars these days have the ability or the capacity to be peppy and sporty when they need to be, but this is definitely very far from a sports or performance car. It's more about getting you great fuel economy, and it has the ability, of course, to do some passing on the highway and has a little bit of power now. I like it in sport mode because the car is still a hybrid, of course, and I'm still using the hybrid technology, but the steering's a bit tighter and the car just feels a little sportier. I'm always a fan of that. And I think a lot of people do prefer sportier Camrys. So I think that's actually why Toyota is now offering the XSE model in the hybrid, is to satisfy the appetite of people who are like, I want the Camry still, but I just want something a little sportier. It's not that I think people think this is a sports car, although the TRD model starts to maybe flirt with that idea. I think it's a sporty vibe and nature of these cars that kind of appeals to the younger buyers of Camrys, which I can only imagine the vast majority of buyers of this car have got to be in that younger demographic and just want a car that feels or looks a little sportier, and the XSE definitely gets that done with the black roof and the spoiler and the exhaust. Obviously, the exhaust on a hybrid's kind of funny to have the either dual or quad exhaust, but it's kind of cool too. It's something else that helps the Camry stand out compared to the Prius. I think a Prius with an exhaust looks ridiculous and super embarrassing, but you have a cool Camry that's a hybrid and has a cool exhaust. It's just like, oh, it happens to be a hybrid. It's not like the entire energy, vibe, aura, and branding of this car is to be a hybrid, and I kind of like that personally. So now I'm putting it back into normal mode to kind of compare. So I immediately feel the steering get a bit looser. Personally, I still prefer the sport mode, but I totally understand for somebody who's more comfort oriented to want to use normal or eco. I'm actually going to go ahead and put it back into sport and keep it nice and tight for myself. All right, and before I forget, let's jump into my favorite part of the video, which is the tall boy test. And I will say that because this car is a little bit on the bigger side, my expectations are kind of high, you know. This is one of those cars you definitely want to pile the homies into, so it better fit some tall boys. We're going to find out now, though, with the tall boy test. So So unfortunately, one of the things this car doesn't have is a sunroof. I really don't care much personally. I'm sure though most people would like it. It is a nice feature, especially because this is a more luxury oriented, eco-friendly vehicle. And the sunroof would be a cool touch, but it is what it is. Honestly, the Teslas, you can't even open the sunroof, so it's not that big of an L. Yeah, so this car has a head-up display, which I honestly didn't notice at first. I think it's probably a little better at night than it is during the day. It's cool that it has it, and definitely makes this car's interior feel more tech-oriented. Obviously, Toyotas, as most Japanese cars are, usually fairly tech-oriented. This has a pretty nice touchscreen. For the 21 model year, they've made it a bit bigger, from 7 inches up to 9 inches, and now it pops up kind of like a floating iPad-style screen. I have mixed feelings about that. I kind of like the integrated screen more than the floating screens personally, although I've personally had cars that have the floating screen. It doesn't bother me after a while, but I think if I had the choice, I would choose the integrated screen as the 2020 has. So aside from the head-up display, this car has a pretty great speaker system. It's the middle system between the really bass system, which isn't so great, and a pretty stellar JBL system that's part of an optional package that costs a couple grand. I think this system is more than fine. Obviously, if you want to get that upgraded package and get that JBL, go for it, but I believe it's only available in the XLE and the XSE anyway. Wrapping this video up, I feel like the reason this car is better than a Prius is for a handful of reasons. Obviously the looks, and I think I can't stop saying that enough, the looks of this car are so much better than the Prius. But when you start weighing out all your options, I think the entire vibe of this car is superior to the Prius. You get a nice mix of cool headlights, you get a wireless charger, you get a bunch of tech inside, and I'm not saying that the Prius doesn't have any of it, but what I'm trying to say is you get all the stuff of a Prius as well as the better looks. And sure, you do give up a bit of MPGs and you do pay a tiny bit more, but I think all of it's well worth it when you consider the looks. I mean, the looks, bro. Who wants to drive a Prius around? Not me. This is pretty clean. I like it. And because it's a hybrid, and the first hybrid I've reviewed, and one of the first hybrids I've driven in a really long time, it's a hybrid vibe. That's right, it's a hybrid vibe. I like it. I think if you're considering one of these, you really can't go wrong. It's kind of best in class. Definitely get one of these over a Prius, if not for anything but the looks. And with that said, I'm out. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all of that. I'm out. Peace.